All right, it should be
Right.
live. All right, so welcome everyone to the Educational Summit, Flattening the Curve. Now, we have today with us some esteemed guests, some experienced educators and people who have worked in high levels of industries, people who have real interest in flattening the curves, so to speak. And so today we have a master group of people who will be sharing their experiences and who will be sharing some of the perspectives that they have on the impact of COVID-19 on the achievement gap. My name is Miguel Barker. I'm a researcher, I'm an educator, and I really enjoy having these kind of conversations. As life would have it, I have a number of friends who also share the same vocation. So my background is that I'm Jamaican, I'm British, and at the moment I am based in Oman as an international educator. And so it is important that we understand that the Jamaican diaspora and the Caribbean diaspora spreads all across the world. So today we're going to give you a taste of the Caribbean diaspora as we weigh our voices into this conversation about COVID-19 and the impact on Caribbean on the achievement gap. Without further ado, I'll pass over to our panelists, our presenters, our speakers who will share just a little bit of their biographies so you can begin to make connections with them. I'll first pass over to Sherry Rodney, who is also a co-moderator on this program. Sherry,
Thank you so
welcome to
much.
Flattening the Curve.
It's my pleasure, Miguel. Thank you so much. So of course, I'm Jamaican. I am currently a university instructor at the Simon Fraser University in Canada. I'm also a PhD candidate as well. I've been teaching mathematics for a very long time. And of course, my focus in research and in education in particular is focused around mathematics education. Thanks and welcome to our live.
Thank you, Sherry. I'll go over now to Dr. Naira Chamberlain. Naira, how are you? Welcome.
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much indeed. My name is Dr. Nara Chamberlain. I'm a professional mathematician. I'm a mathematical modeler. I'm also the president of the Institute of Mathematics and its Application, which is the largest UK professional society for mathematicians. I'm of Jamaican descent. My parents were born in Jamaica, and it's been really good to be invited to talk to you today.
Thank you, Naira, for coming in. And then I'm going to pass over to Dr. Rohan Jawala. Rohan, welcome to Flattening the Curve.
Thank you so much. I'm Rohan Jawala, and I have a passion for education. I have been working in.
I'm of Jamaican descent.
I'm hearing a few.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I'm Rohan Jawala, and I've been working in education for over 25 years. I have a passion for inclusion, for online learning, and generally speaking, educational issues that are hot topics. I've worked in Jamaica, England, and United States, so I come with an international experience. Over to you, Miguel.
Thank you, Rohan, for that. Welcome, and we're very happy to have you on board. Just about now, we also had Tanisha. She just joined just in time, and she just seems to be having some technical challenges. So I think we're just going to give Tanisha the chance to join us, and whenever she does, we'll give her a chance to share her biography as she does her presentation. So I'll get right into it because that's what our audience is expecting of us. Now, just want to let our audience know that we're beaming on Facebook in the Caribbean Educators Group, and we're also beaming on YouTube. Feel free, if you make any comment and you have questions to ask, you can place them in the comments and we'll see them right here. And we perhaps may get a chance to show your comment on screen and perhaps delve into it if it interests us as it interested you yourself. So please feel free to partake in this conversation. So how this will work is that we have a number of presenters who will share some different viewpoints and different perspectives on how the COVID-19 is impacting the achievement gap. And after that, we'll move into a panel discussion. So how is that I will give you a little bit of a lead-in into where this conversation started, and where we intend to take this conversation. So let me just get my screen up. Okay, and then I'm hoping that my screen is showing quite okay. Is that everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, you can, right? Okay, so this conversation began where we have a Facebook group called Caribbean Educators, and someone posted this article from Schools a Week. The article said attainment gap could widen by 75%. And so it had me thinking deeply about what was that all about? You know, what attainment gap were they talking about? So I did a little bit of look at this, and so realized that we're talking about students' performance in the UK and how the coronavirus would impact that gap. So I started to look at the concept of the achievement gap, and we found that when I started check online, what happened was that there was this idea that there's an achievement gap, but there was a big debate about whether it should really be called an opportunity gap. The argument was that the achievement gap seems to have placed the performance and the blame on the outcomes for students rather than on the systemic issues that existed in the institution that they operate within and without. And so there's this debate about whether it should be called an opportunity gap. Now, a number of people have weighed into this conversation, and here's a lovely quote I found from someone, Matthew Kramer from Teach for America. He said, "We think the causes of these differences are unequal and inadequate educational opportunities, not inherent differences in capability or character." And so the idea was that it should be called an opportunity gap. So one of the things that needs to be emphasized in this conversation is that these gaps already exist in society, and governments have been trying numerous initiatives to try and reduce those gaps between genders, boys achieving more than girls, or between subjects. You know, some subject students do better than others, and there's this gap that exists. Between students with special educational needs, people from different family incomes, different starting points, and so on. So these gaps already existed in the educational system long before COVID. What we're interested in, and what we're trying to explore today is whether some of those gaps, which already are part of the system and is quite systemic, whether COVID-19 has impacted those gaps, and in what way, whether it has widened it, which we do expect it to widen it, given the issues that I expect, which are already prevalent in the society. So we expect that to happen. So our exploration is really to look at some of those factors and then look at what perhaps may have happened in those gaps. So as I said before, the opportunity gap or the achievement gap, which is a controversial term at the moment, is family income level, you have gender, SEN designation, access to technology. Some kids have it. Some people are functioning and their parents had the right technology for them to function at home. And then COVID comes, and then that becomes a real issue for them. Race, we have seen data that shows that race is impacted not only by the achievement gap, but also by the opportunity gap. Access to resources, teaching styles, teachers, you know, and those kind of things. So what we're talking about here is this curve, the exponential curve, that gap that continues to widen, and perhaps is going to be wider, much wider during COVID. Our aim is to take that conversation of flattening the curve that is so common now when we talk about COVID and say, what can we do as educators to stop this exponential gap that is widening, and in some way, perhaps flatten that curve? So our conversation today is saying, what are some of the things, some of the factors that are out there, and then say, how can we flatten the curve? So that's really what we're talking about today. Our goal is to find out how has COVID-19 impacted the achievement gap. And I'll move this over to our different presenters today, and they will share their perspectives on how the COVID-19 has impacted the achievement gap. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And we have 4 people here, and I'm hoping that Tanisha will join us soon. She's here, and that's great, fantastic. Welcome, Tanisha. Let me put her on screen. Not getting her there. Tanisha, can you hear us? Tanisha, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome, welcome, welcome,
Oh,
welcome.
thank you. Just a bit of technical difficulties on my part, on my side.
Okay, no problem. Welcome, welcome. It's good to have you. We can't see
Thank you.
your screen. Can't see your screen, but we know you're there and we are hearing you. So we're
Okay.
moving on. So what we'll do when you can get some video going, then we'll get you to do your introduction. We'll move on and you can hear us clearly, right?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. So, all right. So now we'll move into our first presenter, Dr. Ruan Joala. He introduced himself earlier. Ruan, you want to get your screen ready so we can pop that onto the screen so we can show our viewers your presentation, and then you can just take over once you're ready. Over to you, Ruan.
Okay, just making sure. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, you're on.
Are you seeing my screen now at this point in time?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay, let me just. Okay, thanks. I'm hearing a little feedback at this point. So you're seeing my main screen. That is good. All right. So this morning
Yes.
I want to talk to you about the impact of the lack of access to technology. And I think it's important within this context to address this situation. However, before I move on, I want to give a little indication of what the context is like. At this point in time, there's an echo, so if you could close the mics off, please. At this point in time, I must say that presently we have 1.6 or 1.26 billion students who are presently affected by the closure of schools. That is roughly 72% of the learners. The sudden interruption of the traditional model of learning has led to various innovations. And as we think about these innovative practices, we have to consider that we have to think about scaling and the learning strategies that are geared to ensure access and inclusion. So therefore, as technology solutions are introduced, we must address the issue of equity and inclusion. Let me also say that limited access, as outlined by Dr. Barker earlier, can impact life future outcomes for especially those in socioeconomic background, lower socioeconomic background. So we must take that in context. So if we look further, why do we need to be concerned about these issues? And the fact is, we have to be concerned because these issues are related really to the digital divide. And the digital divide is a term that is a reference to, in line with, the lack of modern informational technologies by specific populations within our society. Having this restricted access creates problems that could lead to lifelong learning outcomes. And we have to be very careful because not many individuals across the world will have telephones, televisions, personal computers, and internet. So when we look at the digital divide, we have to look within our society and to establish who has access to internet, who has access to the information technology and the communication technologies necessary. And if they have access, do they have access to the mode or the software necessary on these mobile devices? So as we go forward, we have to examine the whole process. And since we are contextualizing this situation to the Caribbean, I must say that I'm somewhat proud of what we have achieved to some extent. And Statistica that I got some data from stated by 2020 January, the Caribbean area had 26 million internet users. And as a matter of fact, what's fascinating about this figure is that 19.5 million were active social media users in the Caribbean. I must say this is wonderful news. Notwithstanding, I would say that there are many obstacles in the Caribbean that can limit the access to extensive use of these devices. For example, one of the biggest things I've found out across the Caribbean is the unreliable internet providers that we have. So many times you are unable to make connections. You have to maybe go on a hilltop sometimes to have connections if you're not careful. And the lack of access to hardware by students who might be using this form of digital technology now. And of course, let's not forget, we live in an area or a region in the Caribbean that is remnant of many hurricanes, and this can impact our digital use as sometimes these towers are down. Notwithstanding, I must say, the Caribbean has been known for its creative use of addressing crisis. Therefore, it's not surprising that when COVID-19 arrived, the pandemic when it arrived, we were able to be proactive. For example, the University of the West Indies had already in place an emergency plan for a similar situation. For example, they had a Zika outbreak that they had to change and transform the landscape of education back then. So when COVID-19 pandemic came about, they made the adjustments and still had to do further adjustments. After all, most Caribbean countries have developed standard procedures for dealing with emergencies when significant times of disasters. Notwithstanding, I would say that COVID-19 placed educators in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica, in a unique position that they have never been on before. As a matter of fact, you know that we don't have the use of software to that extent and learning management system. So how did Jamaica respond? Now, data suggests by the same organization that I highlighted earlier, that from March last year, 2019, we had roughly 46.2% people in Jamaica accessing the web from their laptops and their desktop computers. So that is wonderful news. However, this is very interesting to note that 48.2% of the users were using mobile devices. So regardless, as we try to flatten the curve, we realize that there's something there that can be used to flatten the curve. People are using a sort of technology that we can use. So most Jamaicans, including young children, prior to COVID-19, were using WhatsApp because they use it to communicate with relatives abroad, share files, and so forth. In Jamaica, many, and across the Caribbean, because I want to set this in context, many students and children generally do not have the luxury of having a monthly internet connection that they have to pay for, or their parents have to pay for. In many cases, the access they have is not reliable, as stated before. So therefore, the challenge was, how do teachers now use technology to galvanize remote teaching? So therefore, it should be noted that Wi-Fi connection is important to the use of WhatsApp. So if you do not have Wi-Fi connection, you have to buy. So that's a cost factor. If students and users of WhatsApp are unable to purchase data because of financial reasons, then we can see the gap opening up. So one major drawback is that you need to have access, and access requires some form of financial support. So therefore, I'm calling on governments across the Caribbean, policymakers, telecommunication companies to discuss ways in which our Caribbean students can have reliable internet, that's one, and a pathway to lowering the cost of buying data, because sometimes buying data is an exchange of making the option between buying data or providing food. So I just want to make that clear. So therefore, the teachers responded well by using WhatsApp to provide instructions, asking parents to be involved in their children's learning, which is another way of kind of flattening that curve to ensure equality, because parent involvement is also an imperative part of decreasing achievement gaps within our society. So as I summarize what I want to say at this point, I want to leave a few tips regarding the use of WhatsApp. Now, if you just use a tool just as it is, it's not going to be effective, to be honest, because if you start using the tool with the wrong technology or pedagogical ideas, then things will run into shambles, to be exact. So I would say that as individuals and teaching in the Caribbean who want to use WhatsApp as a process of moving forward, humanize your WhatsApp profile by putting a picture. Have weekly announcements to encourage students and motivate students. Create a message outlining the expectation of the group and general protocols. Develop a schedule for posting work and general communication. You should do that. And ensure parent involvement. As I indicated, you ensure that your child is submitting work on time. And it's always good to check your child's devices because you never know what's going on. And that's a key thing. And be aware to respond to students and parents' questions. Sometimes the parents need to be taught in order to support their children. And use recording of feature of WhatsApp to ensure that students are able to communicate with you effectively if you're using that. And check on students who are not actually engaged, because I think it's important that you show your emotional presence and that you care for these students, because during this time, students are going through so many crises at this time. And summarize a message at the end of the week to ensure that you are able to give the required feedback. So I think as we move forward, it's important that, and I think I was not moving my slides, sorry. I think that is important that we understand the need to ensure that we support the students that we are working with. And in conclusion, I want to say to you that we have to be proactive in our action. We have to be flexible in our approach. We have to ensure that access is a part of the whole process, because at the end of the day, if students do not have access, we will have a problem. And realistically, we have to think about what we're able to do. You can't try to change the world in such a short time, because if you are not a user of the technology, then that will be problematic. I have also included the bit.ly link for this infographics at this point. So if you want to use it, you can use it, copy that link, and then you will have access to the actual presentation and also the poster created. Over to you, Dr. Bach. You're muted.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that presentation. I was muted there. Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Some very important points raised there. I'm sure that anyone's looking at the issue of technology and how we can maybe stop that gap from widening. Some of the points that you've shared so far will certainly help them in that endeavor. So really, some really interesting points raised. So now we continue our presentation, and then we're going to be moving over to Sherry Rodney, who will be joining us in this aspect of the presentation. She'll be looking at mathematics. Sherry, have you gotten your screen ready to go? I can see. So I'm going to put that up so we can see what's going on. And over to you. Can't wait for this.
Thank you so much, Miguel. So in the COVID pandemic, flatten the curve has to do with containing the number of people infected by the coronavirus. But today, I want to focus my talk on flattening the curve as it has to do with an already existing gap in the in mathematics education. So I'm not interested in looking at a gap in attainment in different groups like race, gender, socioeconomic status, but I'm more concerned in a general gap simply because, similar to the COVID-19 pandemic, mathematics has been a global crisis. So what is this curve that that is needed to be flattened? I'm saying that because mathematics is such a cognitive discipline. I'm getting a feedback, Miguel. So
yeah, it's fixed.
Thank you. So I'm saying that because mathematics is such a cognitive discipline, there is always this less emphasis placed on the affective domain of learning mathematics. And when I talk about the affective domain, I'm talking about how do we cater to the emotions in the mathematics classroom. That is the fear, anxiety, joy, happiness. But my talk today is focusing mainly on curiosity. So if I'm teaching mathematics remotely, students are having virtual experiences. How do we capture this curiosity to ensure that they are thinking about mathematics, they are investigating mathematical ideas? So specifically, I want to look at, is there a latitude given to students' emotions when they are engaged in remote learning experiences, especially because mathematics is such a cognitive discipline? So my first point of entry in this discussion is to make a distinction between these two things, remote and online instruction. So often we use both terms interchangeably, not recognizing that these two things are different. So remote instruction has to do with a solution in delivering a course or curriculum when there's an interruption in the face-to-face classes. It means that remote instruction is instantaneous, it is short-term, and the content design is always an ongoing process. On the other hand, online instruction is intentional delivery of an online curriculum. It's deliberate, it is long-term, and the content is designed way in advance. So for my talk today, the focus is on remote teaching in terms of mathematics in the classroom. So when you're teaching remotely, there are two specific methods. One is synchronous, which means that lessons happen in real time, just as we are doing now. And we normally use web conferencing platforms for synchronous methods of teaching online. And there is also the asynchronous method where you have pre-recorded lessons, and these are uploaded to a platform where students can work at their own pace over a period of time. So I am specifically talking today about the synchronous method of teaching. There are a lot of platforms. As Rowan just talked about WhatsApp and so on. These are also platforms that we can use for remote teaching. So we have the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, we have Zoom, Blue Jeans Meetings, Microsoft Teams, and this one is a feature of the Office 365. We have Google Hangouts Meet, we have Slack, Cisco WebEx, and GoToMeeting. Now the thing is, this list is not exhaustive. So there are many other platforms out there that you can use. It depends on your context, it depends on your students' learning style, and it also depends on the design of your course. So you can choose any of these platforms based on your own context. Of course, for teaching mathematics, we also have different resources that we can use from virtual spaces. We have ebooks, we have apps, we have software, and we have some videos. This list, again, is not exhaustive. So here's the big question. How do we stimulate curiosity in a virtual learning environment so that the achievement gap is improved, maintained, and not widened? And again, here my focus is on curiosity. So I have one possible solution, and that solution is to purposefully present situations that will lead students to wonder, meaning you give them the opportunity to ask what-ifs questions and drive them to a point of surprise. So one way in which this can be done is I'm sharing a little activity that we could use. So this is the Pythagoras theorem, which a lot of us have experienced at some point in our lives. And we all know that the theorem says that the area of these two sides, the area of the squares on these two sides, adds up to the area of this square. So here's the thing. I'm using this software called the Geometry Sketchpad. And this right angle triangle here is normally the conventional orientation that we use when we teach. But the beauty about this software is that it can change the position of your triangle so that students begin to be more stimulated as to, oh, it can change, you know, I didn't see it this way before. But notice that while I drag, the theorem remains intact, as you see in the two red circular sections. But here's the thing. How can we use such an activity to generate what-if questions? This is what we're accustomed to. This is what students are accustomed to. So here's, what if it was an equilateral triangle? Would this theorem still hold? Again, if we drag, paying keen attention to what's happening in the red highlights, then it proves that if it's an equilateral triangle, then this still holds. But what if it's a regular pentagon? Is it still true? And so that is something that we can test as well. So you can see how students can develop their what-ifs questions. And the next stage probably would be, what if it's a regular hexagon? What if it's a regular icosagon? And so on. And so that opens a window for exploration, investigation in the virtual space using softwares like this. But here comes a surprise. So what if it's a semicircle? What does that look like? How does it work? Does Pythagoras' theory has anything to do with a semicircle? And again, if you pay keen attention to what's going on in the red section, you'll recognize that Pythagoras' theory works with a semicircle as well. When we give students activities like these, our students are more inclined to go out and search, go out and investigate. What if it was an irregular shape? What if it was a parallelogram like a trapezoid? What if it was a parallelogram like a rhombus? Would it still hold? And so even after the interaction in the remote teaching experience, the curiosity still continues because they're constantly asking what if, they're constantly checking to see if it holds true with different scenarios and different situations. So what I'm basically saying is that while we're teaching remotely, there's not much that can be lost in terms of curiosity if we purposefully plan our activities to ensure that students are still stimulated to think about things, students are still stimulated to investigate and explore new ideas. So it does not necessarily mean that because we're teaching online, then the gap has to be widened. So in short, this gap flattening the curve that I want to focus on is the fact that we have been doing mathematics with the focus on just knowledge, formulas, and so on. But how about looking at students' emotions? And in this sense, their curiosity. Are we taking away their curiosity when they are no longer doing in-person, face-to-face lessons? How can we ensure that it is promoted while we focus on teaching mathematics remotely? So basically, this flattening of the curve from any context, and as I said before, from a global context, because mathematics is also a global crisis, it doesn't mean that because we're doing online remote teaching, it does not necessarily mean that everything that is lost face-to-face will also be lost when you go into virtual spaces. Thank you. Miguel, over to you.
Very much. Is my mic mute? No, it's not.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much, Sherry. I'm sure there's a lot there that we can feed from. Certainly mathematics is one of those subjects that has a real achievement gap compared to other subjects. And given the challenges that math face with resources and quality of teaching and students' effective responses to mathematics, certainly this distance that COVID-19 has interjected into this conversation will not in any way make it easier for students to learn and love mathematics. So certainly what teachers can do is try and find resources that can, get them all motivated and all fired up. So thanks for that. We're going to go over now to Tanisha Pasco. We're having some difficulties with her on screen, but we can hear you, Tanisha. Tanisha, want to say hi? Tanisha? Yes, we can hear you. Say hi.
Hello.
So if you let's have a go at sharing your screen, because if your screen can be shared, then it's fine, and then at least we can function with that. So have a go at sharing your screen, and we will see how that works. Because at the moment you're coming up as a blank screen. You're here, we can hear you, but we're certainly not able to see you. Tanisha had some challenges with her technology there getting in. We'll see if we can flatten the curve for her as well. But so far some interesting stuff coming through. I think we have some questions as well. Some questions that are coming through as well. So we will certainly be responding to some of those questions. Yeah. In the interim, we just need to make sure that we can get going. So Tanisha, any joy with sharing your screen? It's not there. She's here, but Tanisha.
Hello.
I can hear you. We can hear you. Are you? Can you ever go at sharing your screen so that I can pop your screen up, and then we don't have to worry about your video if that's the issue.
It's not actually working. The sharing of screen for whatever reason.
All right. So what I can do, I can share your presentation that you shared with me, and then you can just talk.
Yes.
Just talk through your presentation. We are problem solvers here, so we have no issues with this. This is what we do in this time. We solve the problem. So I'll just put your screen up, and I'll let you know when that's good to go.
Yes.
Can you see us? Can you see us?
I can see you and Cherie.
Okay. Okay. Great. So I'll pop your thing on the screen. Let me just find that back because I kind of minimized it. So I'll put that up on the screen and find your presentation because you did send that in beforehand. And yeah, I think we may be good to go here. Let me just get this thing. Let me just quit this because it's getting too busy there. All right, so presentation mode. And we might be able to overcome this challenge that we're facing at the moment. So I'll share an application window. I'll find it. So I think is it on screen now? Tell me, can you see the screen? Tanisha? Don't know what's going on. I don't know what happened there. I tried to share your screen, but hold on. Was anyone seeing the screen when I shared it? You were seeing the screen. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened there. Tanisha?
Hello, I can hear you.
Could you see the screen when I put it up?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'll put it back up and you just talk through that screen, all right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, I think you were on, you're muted. That's what happened. All right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you can do that. Over to you. Are we having some problems there?
I'm only seeing you, Miguel, but not the presentation.
Can you see it now?
Not at the minute.
Oh yeah, I stopped sharing. Sorry, my bad. I'd stop sharing. I wanted to get back to you. So I'd stop sharing. So now you should speak now, yeah?
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that it's coming up. So, for my presentation today, I'm looking at the impact of COVID-19 on children with special educational needs and disabilities, and this one is a personal one for me because I think I've shared before that I have two boys with autism, and so this is part of what I'm going through as well. So in looking at SEN, it's quite right that I'll put the definition on the screen just to go through what is special educational needs.
Yep.
Now, special educational needs, as defined by the Code of Practice, looks at a child or a young person has if they have a learning difficulty or disability which calls for special educational provision to be made for him or her. A young person has a learning difficulty or disability if there is a significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of others of the same age. So there might be children who are not learning at the same rate, but it has to be seen as a significantly greater difficulty for a child to be on the SEN register. And what I'll speak about today is in the context of what's happening in the UK and specifically in England. So in terms of SEN and the SEN register, there are two broad areas. There are students who are categorized as SEND support, and there are students who are categorized as children having educational health care plan. Currently in the UK, there are 1.3 million students who falls on the SEN register. So of that, 278,000 has EHC plan, and my two boys are part of that 270,000 students with educational healthcare plan. Now, a student with a educational healthcare plan, it's a legal document. So, I mean, for those students, it's legally binding, and therefore local authorities are quite keen to ensure that schools are following the regulations. So this is just a little bit of a background information as we look at how COVID is affecting children with special needs. In terms of context and having a general picture of what's happening for SEN students within the UK, there's a slide there that should talk a little bit about SEN facts. There are many other facts, but I want to highlight these 5 areas. Pupils who qualify for free school meals, 27.1% of those students are students with SEN. So, and you could say it's a double whammy of students having a special needs and also categorized as being disadvantaged students. So high level of vulnerability. The UK government at the minute is spending $9.4 billion to support SEN students. But a real concern is the number of students with special needs who are being permanently excluded from school. So if we're talking about flattening the curve, we need to have those students in school. So it's something that we need to look at to see how best we can ensure that students are having the correct support to flatten the curve, but they need to be in school. So 44.9% of students who are excluded are students with special needs. So we won't be able to flatten the curve with those students out of school. And I think another fact that we need to think about in terms of flattening the curve, 50% of local authorities in the UK have been graded as underperforming. So if you imagine the people who are supposed to be looking at taking care of SEN needs and overseeing and ensuring that schools are doing what they need to do and the health sector is doing what they're actually failing students. So 50% of local authorities are underperforming. So there's no flattening the curve until we get that get local authority working at the level of good to outstanding for special needs students. So what are the common concerns before COVID-19? Because the issue that we're facing now is not necessarily related to COVID-19. There has been historic failures within the SCN community for SCN children. So parents have long felt that they're not able to access the support that they need, the services that should be available to their children. Teachers have raised concern that in terms of the inadequate teacher preparation during initial teacher training. I think I asked on Twitter a few weeks ago, and a few people said that they had 2 days in a school to shadow a child with special needs, and that actually that's not enough. That's not SEN training. I mean, you can imagine if I turn up to get a math job and the employer asks, I mean, what's your math skill? And I say, well, I don't have enough training to deliver the math curriculum, that I wouldn't be getting that job. But at the minute, some teachers are saying they're not adequately prepared to support SEN children. Another issue just before COVID was the lack of resources available to schools. So there's no flattening of the curve with lack of resources in schools, and also the unlawful SEN practices. There is a common theme of a postcode lottery for SEN children. So it all depends on where you live. You'll be able to access these services. So there's a lot going on in the SEN community that needed attention before COVID, and with COVID-19, it is just making it a little bit worse. So going through what are the current concerns for children with SEN? There's an inability to access learning via the online platforms, and the level of support that students tend to get in the classroom, they're not able to get that support now. And as a result, there's lots of difficulties at home for some of those students, the lack of resources at home, their parents who are not able to support their children with the work needs to be broken down, work needs to be differentiated. Losses, children have lost routine, structure, interactions with their peers. So these are some general concerns when I phone parents for children with educational healthcare plan, that students are missing school, they are missing the routines they had. And a big concern is their mental health of students. And there's a relaxing of the SEN rights for children with EHC plan, and that's the group that I spoke about, where the provision that needs to be put in place is legally binding. The government at this point has relaxed the rule and has asked local authorities to use reasonable endeavors to ensure that SEN needs are being met. So, so possible impact of COVID-19 regression, and I know this for children with autism, that if they don't continue learning, then there's a high chance that what they've learned, it will disappear, and it will take a long time for them to get back on track. Increased levels of anxieties, inadequate overall support, increased stress levels, trauma, and of course, the widening of the attainment gap. So I'm gonna finish up now by saying I've done some research, and Professor Barry Carpenter from Oxford Brookes University spoke about the 5 levers. And so when students go back to school, we should look at relationships, community, transparent curriculum, metacognition, and space. And just to have a look at relationships, we can't expect our students to return joyfully. And many of the relationships that were thriving may need to be invested in and restored. We need students to be at their best for us to flatten the curve. We must recognize that community will have been based in the community for a long period of time. We need to listen to what has happened in this time, understand the needs of our community, and engage them in the transitioning of learning back into school. So these are some of the areas that we need to be looking at when we get back into school so we can flatten the curve. And I'll just leave you with a final statement. Pupils with SEND are among the most vulnerable in the school system. The quality of support they receive affects their well-being, educational attainment, likelihood of subsequent employment, and long-term life prospects. So whatever we need to do, we need to be working very hard to flatten this curve and ensuring that children with special needs are getting the support that they need. And I can say with COVID-19, it's a pause rather than students falling behind. Just like the Premier League, there's a pause. When they get back, they will pick up where they left off. But with children, we're telling them that they're behind. And so we have to really revisit that thinking and think about how we can support them when they get back, especially kids with special needs. And that's my presentation today. Sorry if it's a little bit rushed.
Thank you. A lot of valuable information coming out of that. This is that you were facing with the technology. Is that SEN started 8 boys will impact them. And the 5 levers you pointed to and suggested, carpenter will be important, begin to reopen and make it smooth. So as we're going on into our final present today, and that's Dr. Nara Chamberlain. He'll share a little bit of information about COVID and how some surprising Nara, are you ready?
Yes, I believe I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Over to you.
Okay.
Yep.
And share screen.
Just share your screen with me and then I copy it. Yep. We're waiting on Nara to get his screen ready. So far, so good. We're seeing a number of people signing in to take in the conversation.
Trying to share the screen?
No, I don't think I have yours ready. But it's here. At the moment, don't see it as yet. Just tell me, and then if anything, I'll just do what we did for Tanisha there. What is this? Come on. Yeah, how are we doing?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's coming.
Is it coming up now?
Hold on. Where is your screen? I don't see your screen. It's you twice. It seems. Don't know why.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Good. I think that's you now. Yep, good. You're all good, yes. Yep, your screen is there. I think it's just see the screen.
Right. Unfortunately, did you not see my screen there? No. Hello.
I saw your screen. When I put it up, it comes up. I can see.
Let's do that. Well, let's
Nara,
try
you hear
again.
me? Screen. That's where you need to. We've lost Tanisha. Just getting Naira set up. See if I just find your presentation, because I know you sent it to me. Yeah. And we may just go from there. Yeah. Don't know why my close some stuff.
Right. What I might have to do is I might have to email you my presentation. Is that okay?
If you do that quickly, then I can pop it up in that same time. Yep. Yeah. Being found. Send it across and just download it and pop it on the screen. Let me close this one in the meantime. Has it been sent?
Right. No. Okay.
I'm just like waiting for it.
Okay, I've sent it now. Not too sure what happened there. Unfortunately, I tried to I press share screen, and unfortunately, nothing happened. I'll try one more time. Do you know what I mean? Technology, eh?
Yeah, it's all right. I think we're. It will just mean that anyone of you from that's why it's arrived now. So down. That would be your.
You received it?
Yep, I'm just downloading it, and then then we should be good to go. Opening, I'm popping that up, getting it quite ready, and I'm just going to share my screen. Yep, and then we're good to go. All right, so when I share screen, you'll be able to see what's going on here. Yeah, you can see.
Not yet, and it's tornadoing at the moment. Right, flattening the curve. If we move on to the next slide.
Yep.
All right. Okay, next slide. Okay, right, I'm going to start now. All right, so flattening the curve. How mathematical modelling could have addressed the BAME in the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Like I said, my name is Dr. Nara Chamberlain. I'm a professional mathematician. And what was interesting, something interesting happened actually in March. If you go to the next slide. Yep, next slide. Right, excellent. Right, on the 17th of March, on the BBC News, what they actually did is that they actually showed how the virus could actually have spread across the country, and they showed that this complicated mathematical equation called the SIRS model. And I thought, well, this is quite interesting. This shows how serious the situation is where you actually see a complicated mathematical model trying to say, right, this is how the spread of COVID, and this is what we're going to do about it. Next slide. See, now, when the scientists and the modelers are doing these models, the question is, do they actually model the group population by age? Next slide. The answer is yes. One of the things that they actually do is they do say, they do say, right, our models predict that the COVID will have an effect on your age. You know, if you're the older you are, the more serious that COVID could be actually for you. And the next question is, did they actually model the group population by ethnicity? Next slide. The answer was no. Nobody looked at the question, or we don't really know whether anybody asked the question, did COVID actually affect you based on your ethnicity? Next slide. Now, what happened, and this was very much of a surprise, was as the number of cases started to rise, especially in the United Kingdom, they started to notice that there was a higher proportion of people of the BAME background that were actually were infected by this COVID and was dying from COVID. You can actually see the headline from, let's say, The Guardian, and there's a headline for the Mail Online. You even had the BME chief complaining that there was a failure to actually record the ethnicity of those COVID-19 victims, and he's called it a scandal. Next slide. Now, but thing is, this is not just in the UK. Actually, there was cases of BM people being actually in Norway and also in America and in other countries where you have ethnic minorities. You've seen that there was actually a higher proportion of people who were suffering from this COVID virus. Yes. Next slide. See, now a lot of people was actually having a debate and saying, okay, well, why is this true? Why is this occurring? And why didn't the mathematical model actually predicted this? And they said, well, there are a number of people stated a number of contributing factors, such as pre-existing medical conditions, inequality, you know, socio-economical situations, access to healthcare, and deprivation. And some people was talking about the BME's occupation. They're saying that there's a high percentage of those who are, let's say, health workers, who work in, who are carers, who are actually at the front line meeting people who have actually COVID, and a number of factors there. But one of the things that was stated by the British Health Service is saying that these factors often overlap with each other and can be actually complex to unravel. Next slide. Now, seeing as a lot of people actually are pointing and saying this is complex, but what I want to do is I want to look at probably another factor, which is looking at the underlying structure of a BAME community. Yeah, and what that's saying is this: it's saying that according to Weaver, the term complex system refers to the problem that involves dealing with simultaneous with scalable number of factors which interact in a way, yeah? And what they're saying is that really and truly, unless you actually look at the underlying connectivity of that group to actually explain the system's behavior, it's useless without actually looking at the underlying system behavior. So what we're saying is really and truly is that when we're looking at these graphs, we're saying that if you look at the network or how actually people connect together, when you're looking at the, let's say, wider general population, people tend to connect together much more in a random fashion. But while for the BME, for the general population, it is much more regular. We are much more of a community cluster base where we're much more of a tight knit community, right? Next slide. So if I was actually doing a model, which is saying, okay, so each node, which is on the dots, are people. Now the circles on the outside, that represents, let's say, the general population. The lines indicate is who they will actually connect to, or who they actually associate with. And then the central circle, the central network, is a BME community. And as you can see, they are more likely to connect with their neighbor. So they actually are much more close-knitted community. So that is much more in line as like a village community, as opposed to the general population who may not actually associate with the neighbor. They may travel a certain long distance to associate with somebody else. Next slide. Now, what we have here is that the black dots represents those people who are not affected. The green dots represents those who are affected, who got COVID in the BME community, while the red dots represents those who got COVID in the general population. Next slide. Right. So what I'm going to do here is saying, okay, what we're going to do is that we're going to do a little like a simulation. We're going to actually introduce a game rule. This has been inspired by this mathematician called John Conway, who's a great mathematician who unfortunately passed away this year due to COVID. But being inspired by what he's doing, by a game that he called the game of life, what I've done is I come up with this rule which says if two of the people I am connected to are infected, then I will get COVID next time. So, and I'll repeat that again. If two of the people I am connected to are infected, then I will get COVID next time. So we go next slide. And what you're saying here, this is the yellow dots represents those people who are that are newly got new COVID cases. And as you can see, when I'm running by this rule, if two of the people I'm connected to are infected, then I will get COVID next time. You can see all the new cases are based in the BME community. You don't see new cases actually in the general population. Now, what's the interesting thing is if I actually vary this rule, if it was, like, say, one person, then you wouldn't see a difference. If you had three people, you wouldn't see a difference. But when you're doing, let's say, two, then you actually do see a difference. So when the spread of COVID has a certain characteristic, it actually affects the BMA community, and it is actually to do with the underlying structure of that community. So next slide. So in conclusion, the preliminary results show that one of the possible reasons COVID spreads faster in the BAME community is because of the underlying community structure and its interaction with the general population. And also, I'd like to make the further point is the way that COVID moves about is that once it gets into the BME community, especially before lockdown, it actually remains there longer than the general population. And then once you actually couple the other things such as occupation, access to health, deprivation, then you can actually see one of the possible reasons why COVID actually affects a BME community, whether in the UK, whether in Norway, whether in the United States. It is the whole nature of the structure of an ethnic minority community within a larger country. And that's the end of my presentation. Next slide. And thank you very much. And that was the modelling the impact of COVID-19 on BME. Back to you, Murgo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Really, take on this. What I learned from that was of the fact that the BME community, and I'm going to get raw. We have an avatar for Pasco as well. I think I have into the conversation through the mics. So yeah, what piece? Because it's not that the BME community is more to the one narrative. Those are spread much faster than it would in other communities. Connect. So that is really a powerful model that you're sharing there. I'm sure you might have to defend that model So the first thing that I'm going to pop onto the screen to continue here is one of our audience member, pretty much. Can you see what's on the screen here? Can you see that?
No, I'm only seeing you.
It says, so I see you, but it's frozen. It says something.
It says, so basically, it is our way of life that's been blamed.
Is it basically shall I answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the questions already here. So
The way, thing is another day, the way that, let's say our community is structured and the links to the general population, you got to see in terms of when COVID or another virus that have a similar nature actually comes in. It is this case of what is the entry points. The entry points could be possibly those frontline workers which is high proportionally BME. And let's say, for instance, once they get it and once they actually bring it into this tight-knit community, it's very hard for it to actually to leave that community. It actually remains there. So it's more, not so much of our lifestyle, but it's the whole factors of the socio-economical structure is to has an influence on what is going on. But there are strategies. But what we have to do is, one, we have to invest in strategies to defeat it and actually have a look. So because we've got to be prepared. So let's say, for instance, if there's like a COVID-25 or a COVID-29 or a COVID-30, we have to look at the lessons learned from COVID-19 so that we are prepared come next time.
Weighing on that, because it seems like it's some other questions coming in, and I'll pop them up in a bit. No points on that one. Let's put another comment that's here. Let's see if you can see the comments. Here, here's another one. It says,
yeah. Shall I answer that? Do you want me to?
Yeah, we can carry on with that. That seems to be generating most of the.
Okay.
Among them. Are you seeing the question, Naira?
Yeah. Okay. Right. Shall I go for it? You saying the question is, this has got nothing to do with the treatment of the BME community works on the frontline jobs and therefore spread faster among them. The answer to that.
Yeah, I'm just taking the question directly and pasting it. So it's not my question. Go. Any thoughts? Naira? Is he lost? Have we lost him?
No, maybe he's having some audio.
Yeah. So there's even another question here that says, isn't the fact that the frontline jobs are BAME? The number of questions around it. I'll put another one. Because I think we have lost Naira. All right, so I'll just go to the other questions, and when Naira comes back, a lot of people are interested in that model, and perhaps what Naira is getting at is that this might be one of the factors that saw that increased infection rate. Not necessarily. What our viewers are suggesting is that there are some other things that they are. It says, where are schools in the Caribbean currently with regards to awareness of SEND strategies? Tanisha. We've lost Tanisha.
Miguel,
I
think some of us are having sound issues.
Yeah. Naira? Ron, can you?
Yeah, are you hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
I can hear everybody but
Yeah.
Mego.
I saw the question. I saw the question. You want me to take that one regarding Caribbean countries? I'll just take it because I think I work with the Caribbean.
Take it.
Yeah, I work with the Caribbean, especially with teachers in the Caribbean with the University of the Open Campus. And when I realized that the Caribbean is emerging towards a framework in most countries to address special education needs, I think the issue of funding is a crisis, and I think there needs to be more advocacy. There also needs to be a process by which all students can be screened, and I don't think they have that support. I met someone on the raft the other day while doing a trip in Jamaica, and he explained to me that his son was having severe problems. I gave him the recommendation to do, and I asked someone else to what would be the process, and they said that it would be a long drawn out process. So we have to make access towards testing and the identification of special needs within students a priority if we're truly to have a framework that is going to be supporting all students. So I think it's emerging, but it's not there yet.
I wish we had Tanisha on just to weigh in on that, because that seems to be one area where she has a lot of interest, and our presentation was there. Again, Nara, you're still, can you a lot of coming back on the model? I know, as I said, you because the media, you're up against the media and what's happening in the media. So here's another one. Let's see if it fits. You see, coach, which is free very well with COVID, but in the call center, because of how they work and social distancing. So it's
yeah, Michael.
Shall I answer that?
Yeah, it's directed at your model, so I can't speak for it.
Okay.
Yeah, as I was saying that from your presentation, it's the only way, the only reason. Was I correct in seeing it that way?
Okay. I'll answer that. First things first, what a lot of people said, in terms of COVID, why was there a high proportion of Black people, BME people, have got COVID? Some people suggesting it was to do with genetics, but the thing is, when you look at the spread of COVID we've seen within the West Indies and within Africa, especially West Africa, you see it's actually much more lower rate. So the genetics is out. However, when you're talking about social distancing, yeah, that is also a factor. But it's also what is the case of who you actually get contact with before lockdown, is because the infection comes through and spreads through before lockdown. Before you have lockdown, who is it? How is it going to spread? Now, the key things is that for those places where the BME are the minority in the country, it's the case of that the virus came into those communities before lockdown and remained in those communities before lockdown, and that's an issue, and that's a factor. There are other factors that come into play, especially how the BME are getting treated on the front line, because at the end of the day, who do they contact with in the front line? Because those are going to be the people that are going to be the entrance points that will actually bring COVID within one of the people that will bring the COVID within the BME community, and this is what the model is showing so far. Yeah. I can answer that one. Is it to do with overcrowding? overcrowding is only just one issue, but thing is, end of the day, you have to look at the community, because one of the things that I've also noticed is that those communities in the general population that lives in a village, they actually have the same problems as a BME community. You know, because once COVID goes into, like, say, a village, that in a village community, they have a fast spread, fast spread. So, you know, yeah, overcrowding is a factor, but there's other factors, and we're going to take in consideration those other factors as well. Yep.
I see Sherry nodding. Any thoughts?
If you keep track of what's going on globally in terms of the COVID pandemic, I'm quite sure that there are other countries like Italy, where even China, that had a lot of issues in specific towns, cities, communities, and so on. And I think it's probably because the BME community would be a minority in those countries, right? So at first, when I started to keep track of what's going on with COVID and you know, hearing it's more prevalent in the Black communities and so on, but at the same time, you have places like Germany and so on that has Black as minority, and it wasn't the case in some of those troubled cities. So it just depends on the demographics and the group of people who are living in different cities and so on.
Yeah. Shall I? Yeah. Yes. I mean, again, it's all depending on, let's say the dynamics, the underlying structure, the network. So, for instance, you know, in Italy, are the BME community, are they much more less connected, more integrated, more spread out? So you don't actually see that it's you know, it's less segregated. You know, so yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important, the point that you are making, or important point that you are making regarding the model, because it's easy for the subtlety of the idea to be lost in the headline in terms of how people view these headlines. But what you're saying is that in countries like the UK, by the time the lockdown came into effect, where everybody was forced to isolate, it had already gotten into the BME community. And the nature of the community was such that the spread would have been far in your presentation. Would have, I mean, anyone who live in those communities will know that people to see people rather than even associated with their neighbors, while the community, by virtue of the way that it connects, not only with their neighbors, but even with their own families, by the time the lockdown come in, might have begun to spread it amongst their people. And so you'll find that in other countries, for example, pick that up, that very quickly the government actually enforced social distancing rules. By the time it got into the country, there was social distancing rule in place. And the one place we saw that breakout was where the call center that someone mentioned in their comments. So perhaps the modeling itself, and anyone who works with models will know that there are certain conditions that are standing. Let me throw and speak from people out there. There's a Sasha Taylor here. Could organizational culture have a greater impact and proportionately affecting BAME healthcare professionals? It's a different angle on this question. Thanks for that question, Sasha. Maybe the way in which these organizations are structured and the internal culture is that the BME healthcare professionals are affected more than others because of how they're organized. No one want to unpack that? That one is a bit too heavy. I'll throw another. for Sherry, it seems. This one is about math. The local and regional assessment of students in mathematics has not changed given the present pandemic or the mathematics pandemic. How can we ensure that students and teachers focus on
the? I'm
on
not
the
seeing the rest.
Okay.
Okay.
It's coming up on the curiosity where rather than being asked to give your understanding. That's a mouthful. Coming from William Fullerton.
Thanks for that question, William. So I'm always an advocate for different modes of assessment. And I always believe that students should be allowed to express themselves in so many different ways and be assessed in that sense. And so when we're talking about assessment, when it comes on to the curiosity for our students, of course, curiosity has a close link to creativity. And so in the ways in which we assess students, I think that we should be able to capture their creativity, their innovative ideas and so on. To assign certain types of evaluation to students' work. I never believe that students' mathematical attainment should be assessed in just one particular way. But there are so many children who are unable to write down formulas and substitute values and do things in a procedural way. But they can create models, they can draw, they can sing about concepts, they can about concepts. And I think those things should be captured in students' assessment. I'm also an advocate for students presenting portfolios and journals of their day-to-day learning experiences. And those things could also be a part of their assessment process. So it's a huge reform that I think is required at this time, and none other time than this time to make some of these adjustments. One, in terms of how we assess our students, and two, in terms of what exactly are we assessing? Are we just assessing their computational skills or their understanding of concepts? Are we assessing their innovativeness, their creativeness, and so on? So for me, I think there should be a shift in the way how we assess students in mathematics.
Keep the conversation around even mathematics or even learning and assessment, and with the distances that we are experiencing now due to COVID, what should we be? I mean, what should governments be doing differently, and what should schools be doing differently then? So I'm throwing in Ron in this one because he's analogy and so on. What exactly should we be doing differently, Ron?
I think at this point in time, we have to realize how we're going to approach the new era of education. Rather, it cannot consistently work in the same way. So therefore, we have to realize that we need a kind of model that will create a shift that will give teachers the opportunity to change from a face-to-face to an online, or vice versa, making it a mixed approach. For example, we see where students are out of class now, so we have to go online. So we have to train individuals in teachers' colleges how to teach online, because that requires a different pedagogical approach from teaching face-to-face. So therefore, our curriculum will need to change how we train teachers, and we have to get them geared for that modality or various modalities. Another thing we have to maybe think about is COVID-19 has shed light on the need for reduced class sizes. And I think we have to really think about that. What mechanism can we do to have students rotate? And in Florida, they're thinking of different modalities here. For example, one, they're thinking of getting students in classes on a rotational basis where you can have reduced numbers and students can come over a period of time. That's one. But again, they're also thinking about doing another interesting part. Prior to, students would move towards the teacher's classroom because the teacher would have a designated class. So therefore, now they're requiring teachers to go to the class. So it's going to take an overall approach. I think educators need to understand that you have to have different project teams working now. You're going to need a crisis intervention team in any school. How are you going to deal with outbreaks regarding if that takes place? And how are you going to reintegrate students into school? Because again, we have some of the students, back to Naira's point, that will go back into their communities and, if possible, could create some problems there in the sense of passing on the disease. And when we look at the factor too, we have look at the Black and ethnic minority group and even lower socio-economic groups in populations across countries. We realize that there are more of grandparents and other relatives living under the same roof. So therefore, we have to be cognizant of how we do approach. But one, the curriculum will need to change. Two, you have to design the school schedule to accommodate that. And three, I would say that at this point in time, you have to have a crisis committee with any school to all schools to address this sort of thing. So I think that is going to be important.
Thanks, Dad. Any other thoughts on that?
Miguel, can I get a go at William's question that's on screen now? That's knowing that there needs to be a better collaboration between stakeholders in education. Yeah. All right. So there's always been this mismatch in terms of what should be done in terms of education. And as Rowan just pointed out, that a first step is to focus on how teachers are trained. So there are lots of negatives that are going around with COVID, but for me, I think that there are positives as well. What I've seen COVID-19 has done, in particular in terms of education, is to bring some of the issues, underlying issues and gaps per se, that has been already there to the forefront, right? So now we can see, it's clear that there's a mismatch based on William's question, that stakeholders, government, teachers, parents, students are never generally on the same pathway. So one of the things that we need to do now in terms of addressing this gap that has been created, that has been there for a while, is to try to find some medium in which there can be a collaboration with all stakeholders in terms of policies, in terms of identifying issues, and in terms of providing and offering solutions. So it should never be, I am finding all these issues, I am creating policies, but there's no solution, and then there's no follow-up, and there's no accountability. Because if those things are not there, then the gaps will continue to be widened, right? And so it is this mismatch that creates the issues in terms of how we deal with technology and so on. For me now, I think that teachers' training should now incorporate remote courses that deals with remote teaching, courses that deals with online teaching, and courses that deals with face-to-face teaching. So once that is there and we have a framework that we can move from, then I think that gap would be easier to close.
I think that's maybe an important piece. There's always this conversation going on now about this conversation that's going on now about the new normal and whether we'll just go back as usual. Hopefully we get to that. Here's another question that's coming in. Like Naira, I know one of the things that, for example, like you is you're a professional mathematician. So when we, for example, are say math teachers and educators are teaching students, we're hoping that will in some way buck the trend and move on into becoming and designing models that they have to defend, but design models and impact in the conversation. What are some of the things that maybe we could do? Because that was some of the things we can do in the new normal to make students choose mathematics and study it all the way through.
Raise their levels of curiosity.
So I think Naira is having some difficulty hearing me. I don't know what's happening when it goes to the UK, because my American and people are. Let me. Are you hearing me now, Naira?
I can. I didn't hear what the question was. I did hear professional mathematician, so I have a funny feeling that question was directly to me. And so, Sherry, if you could actually repeat the question, I'll be able to answer it.
So what the question that Megan wanted to know was how can you help students who wants to go into careers such as yours, be a professional mathematician, in this crisis? How can you help them to stimulate them into choosing careers such as yours? I was even trying to make an attempt to answer, because I was saying the first step is to improve their levels of curiosity, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that really and truly, I mean, with COVID, that doesn't stop you from becoming a mathematician or doing mathematics. COVID doesn't stop you from doing that. I mean, the key thing about mathematics is having that love of problem solving, you know, seeing the questions and solving it and having a go, and also recognizing this. And one thing I do say is that the best, you know, something I learned is that the best mathematicians in the world are not those who find mathematics easy. The best a mathematician is somebody that sees a question and never ever quits. That's a mathematician. Because some people really get this myth that you're thinking that you get a problem, you can solve it in 2 seconds flat. That does not make you a mathematician if you can solve it in 2 seconds flat. The key thing is seeing a problem and never ever quits. Actually going back and saying, if I made a mistake, did I make a mistake on numerically? Did I make a mistake in my assumptions? Did I make a mistake in my calculations? You know, that's what being a mathematician. Now, whether it's COVID-19, 20, 21, 22, 25, that will not stop you from becoming a mathematician. As long, you know, to be a mathematician, you have a pencil, you got a paper, you can be a great mathematician. And one thing that my parents has said to me, you don't need anybody's permission to be a great mathematician. And let me say that you don't need anybody's permission, nor you don't need this COVID to stop you from being a great mathematician. That's how you become a mathematician.
Thank you very much. Here's another question. Now I'm going to take one more question, and then how can BAME? BAME is a British term. I don't know if it exists on the outside of minority ethnic students with this issue, knowing that this in terms of BAME is this issue, knowing this will affect their future progression academically, socially, and in terms of economic development.
Can you see that question,
Nara? Go with that one.
How can we? Oh, so for me, all right. How can we support our BME students, which should know that this will affect their future progress academically, socially, and in terms of economic development? I think the key thing is keep on practicing. You know, if you can go online, and if you can go on YouTube, if you can and see those questions and keep on doing the questions, then by all means. The key thing is, you know, keep yourself mathematically sharp during this time. Go look for problems, invent up problems, see what problems are saying. How can I actually solve this mathematically? Look at, you know, I saw the wonderful example of properties of the Pythagoras triangles. Then, you know, go see whether you can actually find new properties. You know, mathematics is a very creative subject. People think that mathematics is a mechanical subject. No, it's one of the most creative subjects out there. You know, it's all about discovery. You know, discovering new mathematics, understanding about the world around you. And the key thing is keep on doing mathematics, keep on attacking mathematics. That is how we can actually support our BME student going through this crisis.
I want to touch on that issue because I think it's so important. I've been reading some literature on that, and one of the things that we realize that to be effective in the classroom requires a different set of cultural skills that teachers must have. And one of the things that the literature is showing that the perception of a teacher is very evident in the evaluation of students' work. And one of the things they're trying to do is to build a background of data to support the need to get teachers to think more within the framework of a critical sort of pedagogy where you evaluate how you view yourself before actually assessing students' work. Because yes, we know that assessment of students based on the ethnic minority status will vary based on the teacher, based on perception. We know, as a matter of fact, based on research in the United States, that African Americans born in the United States, that is, are deemed differently from those coming in from the Caribbean. Those in the United States who are born in the United States, teachers have less expectations of them and higher of immigrants. So we know the perception exists. So regardless, we have to inform teachers, and we have to also diversify the way we're going to do it, the assessment. Because I think far too long we have presented tests that are very culturally biased to our students. So we therefore need to realign the test and have more of a objective process rather than subjective evaluation of students' work. So I think it needs to go further than that. And prior to this, I would say, yes, we want to flatten the curve, but we can only flatten the curve only if we start investing in early childhood education, and it starts at birth. And we need to do that because therefore, if we can flatten the curves from birth, then we will have long life opportunities for Black and ethnic minority students and every student of color in United States, England, Germany, and also in countries like Jamaica. We can improve the structure by eradicating barriers for those individuals living in Tivoli and living in those areas that are classified as garrison communities. So we need to flatten the curve at all levels.
At all levels. Another question that's coming in. It says, I don't know if you have covered strategies to narrow the gaps, flatten the curve for speakers of other languages. I think this is addressing another group of students or learners who may be affected by this distance that exists. Another curve that's maybe an achievement gap that exists for people with English and as an additional language. Very interesting question. We certainly haven't discussed that. We didn't have a conversation about that, but certainly we can realize that, you know, again, it's going to be the kind of stuff that you looked at, Cherie. I think you could see the kind of stuff that would come in from that.
Yeah, I mean,
yes,
this is going to be a huge idea for your series too, because we need some experts in terms of, because there's a gap, there's a wide gap as well. As a matter of fact, thanks, Kawain, for bringing up this issue, because even in my readings, I've recognized that the ELL communities has great gaps as well. So one of the things that we can probably do is to use this question as our launch pad for our next series, so we can get people who are directly engaged in this type of thing to come and address this as a way forward. Yeah. But it's legitimate. It's legitimate, and it also has a gap. Yeah,
it's good because I think one of the things that I've looked at, I've spoken to linguists recently, and she pointed some things that we overlook. And one of the things that we overlook also is that these individuals, they do have a talent. They're bilingual. They're emerging bilingual. So therefore, they do have the possibility of the skills. So therefore, the misconception needs to be addressed. We need to understand that these are possible children of immigrants, and we have to think about school and parent partnerships and all that sort of stuff we can address in another session. So I'm really excited about that topic.
Yeah. So that is so what we have so far is a question that perhaps can guide the next discussion. Looking at different groups that we need to flatten the curve for, and one of them, ELL, is certainly one that would be. My experience is, I remember when I was working in the UK and I came across, I used to work in a school that had a large number of students who were coming from the refugee community. And I remember having to teach them mathematics. One thing I learned was, they were very good at math, but they just could not decipher what was happening. Kowena sent a thank you for the response to his question. So, and I think he's added another point here to say that some BME fall into this category. So I think my experience is that when I asked the student, I remember asking one of the students to circle some words that they will have that they had challenges with in a math question. And the guy, I think his name is Abdul Rahman, he circled Andrew. The question said, Andrew is a waiter. And the word that he circled, that he said he didn't know what that word meant, was Andrew. That tells you sometimes what we think the support that they need I thought he's going to circle word like percentages and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, he circled tip, TIP, and he circled Andrew. He said he doesn't know what those words meant. And for him, he couldn't decipher what the question was asking. So that's maybe another conversation that we can have, and we take that into post-COVID and so on. So as we bring this together, guys, I think I want to take the time to thank all the presenters. We have lost Tanisha at the beginning and towards him because of the technical challenges he seems to be having with signing in. But our presentation was on point and really raised some very, very important issues around special educational needs and how the curve for those students need to be flattened so that they can access learning and maintain the pace with other students who are currently experiencing, well, just from before and even during COVID. At least we don't want that to be widened. We also heard from Cherie, who talked about teaching mathematics remotely and using a wide range of resources to try and impact the affective domain of learning and trying to really get the curiosity going on that. And for me as a math teacher, that resonates quite well with me because I know that when I'm trying to teach math, I say I need to have a curiosity document, something that gets them interested in mathematics from the start. Rohan, you touched on we had Dr. Rohan Jala, who touched on resources. I know we can really get resources to flatten that curve, to use the resources that are present. And I think he pointed out the fact that a lot of people were already in a resource poverty kind of situation. So this does not help, but using technology such as WhatsApp and effectively. And he has a nice graphic that he has published outside that anyone that is interested can have a look at that and see how WhatsApp can come. And we had Naira with his modeling that looked at looking at the nature of the BME community and how that community, by its very connected nature, may have been exposed to COVID long before in a more dangerous way compared to other communities because of the way that we interact amongst ourselves regularly and in larger groups. So it was really, really, really fun having you guys on board today. We had some technical difficulties, but we don't get where we are by being daunted by technology. And so we overcame those technology. I'm just going to pass over to you just for final words, and then I'll close this because, yeah, it was really, really great having you. So final words starting with Naira.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, and it's been very, very good questions, and it was very good listening to the other speakers and listening to their topics. And thank you for having me on board. And I hope you invite me in again. You know, I know I'm not technically the master educator, but it was really good to mixing and talking with you lot on this stage.
Thank you, Rohan.
Thanks, Dr. Barker, for this wonderful opportunity to present, thought-provoking, inspiring, and it tells us that we have a lot of work to do. So I do hope that this process and this project will continue. Over to you.
And Cherie.
Thank you so much. I echo the sentiments of Rohan and Naira as well. It's really a pleasure to be on this forum, getting experiences and information from everybody in terms of their special area of interest. I also recognize that there's a need, know that the points have been raised and the questions have been asked and we are stimulated. We have a lot of work to be done. And I hope that this is not where the buck stops, but that we as a collaborative group can get involved into researching, writing, presenting, visiting, just to present ourselves as people who have an interest, have a passion about our special areas, and to help as best as we can to close these gaps that we find in our special areas.
All right, thank you very much. To me, again, from me, it was a pleasure having you guys on board, and it was a great show. So I think despite the technical difficulties, I think we got some really positive thing going through. There's a lot of comments still coming through, but as I said, we're gonna have to close this. So from the Flattening the Curve Summit. I want to declare this summit over. And thanks for watching. And if you like what you see here, just look out for the next one. As I said, this is beamed live into the Facebook group, Caribbean Educators. And for the lucky few who were invited on YouTube, you can follow that link. But we hope to keep this going. We have some questions coming out of today that we hope to unpack later on. And certainly we will invite some other people in to join in the conversation. So from me, Miguel Barker here. Just want to say thank you for joining in, and what would be safe, and just follow the guidelines, lockdown guidelines, and just try to make sure that you keep everyone healthy. Thanks for coming in. And so I'm going to close the broadcast now.